Welcome to Investing Bros. I'm Tshroom. We'll be going into the markets today. Bitcoin really failing to make a significant rebound, but some candlesticks are holding where we need them to. Despite it all, could we go lower for Bitcoin and crypto? We're going to ask that question and figure it out. Also, what the heck is going on with Tether? And we've got some bullish stories, a couple of bearish stories. We're going to cover it all here on the other side of the intro. Let's get it. Hey. Go ahead and smash the like buttons. Consider subscribing. I've got Smay here with me. Smay, how are you doing today? How was your Christmas?
Well, man, Tshroom, our Christmas, my Christmas, everybody's Christmas, no, my Christmas was very, very good, filled with
Good.
fun, joy, family, and presents.
Nice.
So I was very happy. How about you? How was your Christmas?
It was great. It was great. I got this necklace here. My wife
Oh,
got me a
wonderful.
brand new version of a necklace I've had now since probably like 2018. But this one is the real deal, so I'm very excited about it. Yeah, other presents. Got to see a lot of people opening the presents that I gave them. And Smay, I'm not the first to say it, but sometimes giving is better than receiving. Do you know what I
That's
mean?
exactly right. That's exactly right. And I gave only one of my family members a present because that's how we do it. Or otherwise, I'd be broke.
Oh man, we got to get you. We got to get you out of that brokenness. That's what we do best here at the Investing Bros. But you've been on board now.
Yes.
After your previous job, you've been on with the Investing Bros now. How many? 2 or 3 weeks now?
About a month.
About a
About a
month. Yeah.
month. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say I've already started stacking my bags once more. I never really stopped, um, you
That's
know,
good.
but I wasn't really as, you know, listen, I don't think you guys understand. When you go from your job is doing a daily crypto show to now your job's not doing a daily crypto show, you're not really in the news as often as preparing for a daily crypto show. So I wasn't really in the news,
Great.
but I still held true to our core values, and that was crypto go up. And so
That's right.
I kept stacking. I kept
That's right.
stacking, and now I'm continuing to stack, and now here I'm back in the news again. It's great.
That's right. That's right. And for those of you who don't know, the deep lore here is that Smay and I, along with Tim, we worked at a different crypto YouTube channel before we started our own here at Investing Bros. So you guys are getting the inside scoop here in the intro. Did you come here for the lore? Maybe you did, but more than likely you came here to get a scoop on what the heck is going on in this turbulent crypto market. Smay, let's go ahead and jump over to the crypto bubbles here. As you can see, virtuals just continues to kill it up 19.7%. That Pudgy Penguins coin that listed there is down 10% this morning. A lot of volatility on that coin's initial couple of weeks in trading. Caspa up 5.4% here. Maker up 4.2. Radium still pumping up 5.1% there. And we even are seeing Brettcoin 6.6, one of the main memes over on the base blockchain, get a nice bid there. Lido up 9.1. Another meme coin here, Bonk, is up 6.5%. And there's some other ones here to mention. But before I do, I want to go ahead and jump on into some bullish Bitcoin news. Let's get into it. There's a lot of shade being thrown in the news today, but there is some very bullish gems in the rough. So let's check them out here. This is one of my early financial freedom pursuit mentors, Robert Kiyosaki. He said this. He said, "Buy one Satoshi and get rich." This is really, really good because it gives folks who maybe feel like they're late to the party that is Bitcoin a bit of hope, right? And he's saying this, not in 2018. He's saying this yesterday. He's saying buy one Satoshi and get rich. So Robert Kiyosaki, of course, he is the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, an investor, an entrepreneur, and very, very successful businessman. So I always like it when he chimes up and speaks for Bitcoin. He does quite often. Let's keep moving though, because the bullishness doesn't stop there. BlackRock and MicroStrategies now almost hold a combined 1 million Bitcoin. Yes, it is true. It is very quickly growing. here for them at over at BlackRock and at MicroStrategies. And wasn't it always going to be this, that two United States corporations would be the ones that figure out what Bitcoin is and also have the means to start acquiring it at an extremely rapid rate? Of course, BlackRock has been absolutely just savage with their acquisition strategy, basically making it something that a group of investors can buy Bitcoin that they couldn't buy before in the form of an ETF. And MicroStrategies was the next best thing for a long time. It wasn't a straight up spot ETF of Bitcoin, but it was close to that because they held the most Bitcoin in town. Well, now that's changed, and IBIT, of course, as an ETF, holds quite a bit more. Just to be clear, it's not BlackRock that holds the Bitcoin. It is, or BlackRock custodies the Bitcoin through Coinbase, but it's actually the Bitcoin price movement belongs to those who are owning the ETF. So a lot of controversy, of course, especially these days. Do you hold your Bitcoin in a cold wallet storage or do you hold it in an ETF? Let me know in the live chat. What do you like to do? Don't get too much detail. Just tell me, what do you like? ETF, cold storage, held on exchange? What is your favorite thing to do there? Regardless, we're seeing what we need to see on the ETF inflows side. You can see here that on the 26th, on the 25th, on Christmas, there was a huge surge in Bitcoin buying, at least through the ETFs. So big inflows there. So that is a little bit of a Santa rally, not too much of a Santa rally, but a little mini one. Now, of course, that came after here one of the highest record outflow days, which was the 18th of December, followed by a couple more days of outflows. But even with the highest day of outflows for Bitcoin ETFs, when you toggle over to the weekly, these weekly outflow histograms are minuscule compared to what we saw in the past, right? And that was because there was prolonged days of selling and outflows. We have not seen that bearish conviction come back to the Bitcoin ETF markets. In fact, it's just been the opposite. There's been an upswell of buying that you can see here, showing you with the crosshairs right there. This big mound of buying. It does seem to be slowing down. We're going to be investigating potentially why we are seeing a downslope, lower highs, for these histograms. I'll just go ahead and tell you right off the bat, I think it has to do with the new year, right? Big money that are buying these ETFs, and even 401k holders that are making the decision to start to allocate into Bitcoin exposed products. They plan in advance, right? They've been planning since, March potentially, or even earlier, to buy into these Bitcoin ETFs after they launch. They certainly didn't buy them the very first weeks that they were out, right? They do more diligence. They don't FOMO. They do diligence. And if they're late, they're late. They missed it. But there's a lot of compelling arguments, and I would be the first in line to make those arguments. The Bitcoin is going much, much higher. And so now that those big money players have made their initial allocations in 2024, they're done, right? And they're waiting until 2025. And that's why I think January is going to be potentially a very, very bullish month for Bitcoin, because everybody who's been buying Bitcoin through the ETFs, they've done a lot of it, right? And so we're seeing these ETFs at this point, going back to my screen, like essentially tread water the last 2 weeks, right? You had a $449 million inflow week, and then you had a negative, call it $100 million outflow week, right? So kind of just treading water, what you would expect for December, right? Because the allocations that have been made for the year have already been made. Where now it's just smaller retailers, smaller percentages of much bigger allocations that are being made kind of in the last moments of the year. So all of that condensed down into the simplest form, there's going to be more buying of Bitcoin next year, in my opinion. Let's go ahead and jump on into what could cause volatility moving into the final hours of 2024 trading for Bitcoin. And it's this, a record 17 billion 800 million worth of Bitcoin and Ethereum options will expire tomorrow. So they will be expiring today. Expect high volatility. So that's exactly the conclusion. There's big options expiries for the end of the quarter and also the end of the year, right? So big volatility is to be expected. We're seeing that on the charts. Let's go ahead and take a look at them right now. I've got the weekly charts here because we're about to get the final the final candle here that will end off the week, the final daily candle that'll end off the weekly candle here. So let's take a look at it. It's been as high as $99,987. I'm sorry, just under 100,000. Let's put it that way. And then it's also been as low as 92,347. Okay, the live price is 94,363. And what we really am wanting to focus on here is that we have been able to remain in this channel, right? Which the low was really put in here in the initial pullback back in November, late November that week, where we got down to 90,250, right? So we have not pulled back to those levels since then, not even through a wick, right? And before I go to the daily chart to show you more, let's look at the MACD, because the MACD is not the most bullish that it could look, right? In fact, when you look at it, it looks a lot like what we saw much earlier in the year, back here when we got a bear cross on the weekly charts. But I am not too worried by this because we are in a pretty exceptional Bitcoin bull market, a bull market where is always going to still be corrections, and we're in one right now, but one where there is going to be elevated periods of overbought signaling from momentum signals and indicators like the MACD. So what I think what we're going to see out on the weekly MACD from here is that we will potentially get a full-on bear cross, but we're actually going to remain elevated from here and move sideways until we start to move higher with these lines. Okay, now this is a pretty ugly drawing, but the point is that we don't get a bear cross immediately that just brings us down like we did from those March highs of 2024. And then we had a period of essentially sideways to down, playing with that. I believe it was 50. Let's go look. I want to say it was like the low 50s levels. Yeah, right around 52. Right. I don't think we see that. And here's why. We've said it earlier this week, but it's an event, right? Right now, the Bitcoin kind of central gravitas is the Donald Trump administration. It's centered around the biggest country in the world with the most powerful military and the biggest, most robust and deepest liquidity in financial markets, the United States, absorbing Bitcoin and giving it the big green stamp of approval by putting it into the strategic reserve, right next to oil, right next to gold and treasuries, right? So that is going to be very big symbolically, and also is going to be pretty big for supply and demand dynamics for Bitcoin. Because once that's in the reserve, right, it's very unlikely to exit the reserve for the United States. Okay, except in a period of extreme panic or something like that, when you would be likely to see the United States sell a bunch of gold and oil, right? Basically never. Okay, so once it enters into there, all that Bitcoin is locked up, and that's going to be very bullish. But we have to get there. Similar to how I've explained earlier this month, we had to get to the election itself, right? And so here I'm on the weekly candles, but there was extreme consolidation here all through March into early November. And all of that was waiting for a big yes or no answer. Was Donald Trump going to win the election? Or was crypto about to get a whole lot more complicated and potentially overregulated by the incoming, what would have been Kamala administration? Well, we got the answer that the market wanted, and Bitcoin moved to the upside. It wasn't going to move to the upside uh, only and absolutely forever. There was, of course, going to be corrections. But this big move got us up above that 100,000 level, right? And why I think it's different this time, why I don't think we're going to just go sideways for, months on end, is because the next big moment is right around the corner. It's January 20th. It's that inauguration day. And if you guys have been tuning into the Investing Bros this week, you've probably heard me tell this tale, but I think it's a really, really important one, because by the time the MACD crosses on the monthly, I do think that we will have had that inauguration event, and that is going to send Bitcoin higher. And this topping signal, that usually a bearish cross would be a topping signal for a local top, I should say, can be ignored, right? Now, now it doesn't mean that you should ignore it completely and don't pay attention to it. Tuning into shows like the Investing Bros we will kind of guide you to what these indicators mean, and if you want to learn more about them, you can actually check out the video you're watching right now. Just scroll down, and then you will see links. This link right here is where you can invest in your trading and in investing future and take that next step and join our trading and investing community. That's right. You can ask me and my partners any question you want about crypto and investing. We're going to be covering a lot of stuff that might be somewhat complicated to you. So if you're looking for a guide, you can join one of our membership tiers and you can gain access to us. If you want to just join for free, you can also do that here and just see what Discord communities are all about. And that'll be fine as well. But jumping back over to the Bitcoin charts, I'm trying to put to rest that this bear cross shouldn't be interpreted as a time to sell Bitcoin. No, no, no. In fact, I think what we see from here with Bitcoin is a pretty explosive January. And this could be the January, this could be the beginning of the year for one of the most bullish years in Bitcoin. Uh, that just full stop is very, very exciting to me. Let's drill down into some lower time frames here. I'm going to go down to the daily chart, and usually you tune into the Investing Bros and you see Tim. You may know him as, and he goes much more in depth into the charts. Spends a lot more time maybe covering divergences or using many more indicators. I'm trying to keep it simple here for you all. We have one more show tomorrow at 11 a.m. and then Tim will be back on Monday. So I'm just trying to keep it simple for you all and kind of commentate on what we're seeing and what we might expect to see within a realm of reasonable possibility. So what I'm thinking we will see for Bitcoin lows into, because we did talk about this, right? We talked about the Bitcoin options expiry. We're going to be talking about this here, what's going on with Tether. We're going to be talking about that in just a second. So we could go ahead and expect that this daily chart for Bitcoin could get pretty let's say bearish, right? Because after all, out on the weekly, we do have a bear cross coming in. Now, a lot of the action for a bear cross, I should also say, happens well before the cross. The cross is usually a lagging indicator, and it's actually the curvature of the initial cross that you'll see downward movement during. So, with all that said, though, I do think we have a second take profit here from Lux Algo that's calling essentially an $84,500 Bitcoin for those who would want to take a short where we currently are, right? That would want to take a short and then take profit at that level. Why? Because the longer you hold that short, the higher the risk. That's how these indicators work. We're right now under a sell rating from LuxAlgo on the daily chart. So that tells me that this is a good time to buy Bitcoin in my opinion, in Tshroom's opinion, right? But LuxAlgo is saying that if you're a technical trader and all you're doing is trading, right now is not the best time to get into Bitcoin because we could potentially go lower. So that is a truth. That is something that the charts are telling us that we could go lower. I do think, though, that there is a good chance that we will continue to do what we have been doing here, and that is hold this uptrending line of support. So, for those of you who have been experienced in trading and investing in crypto, you might be hearing that and you're like, oh man, Tshroom, you don't think we actually will get down to around $85 per Bitcoin? I think there's a good chance that we don't. And that's going to be disappointing for my more experienced investors because they want Bitcoin's price to go down so that they can buy more of it at a discount to today's price. Now, for my newer investors, that's going to be good news because you may have bought up here, right? You may have bought north of $95,000 and you're thinking, man, I'm actually down on this thing called Bitcoin that I don't know much about. Rest assured, everything is going to be okay, right? If history plays out the way it has in the past, if these charts play out the way that history has been a guide for it, Bitcoin is going to be going much higher than this high that we have now of right around $109,000 per Bitcoin. Okay, so but the lower levels to be aware of that you may want to set like a limit order or get some dry powder ready is 84,500, right around that level. Okay, so that is kind of the assessment here for Bitcoin. overall, I do think there's a good chance that we hold this level that would only bring Bitcoin down to around 92,600. Thank you, Smay, for showing everybody this chart. So, with the expiries coming up, something called tax loss harvesting, right? There is an incentive right now for folks to take profit, right? Especially those who, were only ever in Bitcoin for a big trade, whether it be a swing trade where they bought in March or whatever, and they always wanted to sell at the end of the year, or if they bought north of 95,000 and they're wanting to use this opportunity to sell for a loss and then count that against their taxes in the future. Use that loss to count against profits in the future, which is not a bad strategy, right, at all. So I expect December to continue to look pretty ugly, at best sideways, but right now there's not a big bullish catalyst for the end of December, right? The only thing that really I can think of is the fact that January is going to be very bullish because we have a lot of new allocation that's been earmarked for 2025, and folks are going to want to front run the rest of the year's gains, right? I think that there's a potential for a front run into the end of the year to front run January. So, but that's a pretty weak argument in my opinion, right? So right now, I'm thinking, you kind of let the bears come in, wreak a little bit more havoc on this chart, let Bitcoin price come back down and test 95K and try to enter there. That's kind of what I'm thinking for my personal finances. This is not financial advice. It's financial education and it's financial fun, right? All right. So I want to get into the next story here, which is this one. I'm going to go back to BlackRock. Remember, BlackRock over here, they are one of the top buyers of Bitcoin, or at least they're facilitating one of the top assets that's buying Bitcoin, IBIT, the Bitcoin ETF of the spot variety, launched January 10th of 2024. Only been out a year, coming out on exactly a year here in just a couple of days. Okay. But getting into our next story, BlackRock comes back into focus. As of today, BlackRock's ETF has bought 3.5 billion of ETH. So we're going to jump onto the Ethereum chart. Let me know in the comments what your answer is to Arkham's question. What do you think will happen in 2025? Of course, I believe their insinuation here is that if BlackRock is buying Ethereum, that Ethereum is going to do well because BlackRock's not dumb, right? They buy low, they sell high, and BlackRock is buying. Therefore, Ethereum must be ready to go high. Well, let's take a look and see if we have any indication of that being true from the charts. The first thing that I want to look at is actually the Bollinger Bands. So taking a look at the Bollinger Bands here, I can see that Ethereum on the weekly candles is actually remained above that midline of the Bollinger Bands, which is very, very bullish. In fact, it hasn't even really come back down to test that. Hint, hint. That might be what we're about to see next for Ethereum, because if Bitcoin flushes because of all the jitters around the expiries, tax loss harvesting, in this story we're about to get into with Tether, then we could potentially see Ethereum take a dip as well. If Bitcoin goes down, usually Ethereum goes down as well. Okay, but these are buying opportunities. You shouldn't see these as as something to fear. You should see them as an opportunity to add to your bags these scarce commodities like Bitcoin and Ethereum. All right, so checking this out here, this would put Ethereum's price back down below 3,000, down to 2,897. Let's see if we can find some confluence with that level. So how would I do that? One thing I can do is go ahead and turn on the LuxAlgo signals and overlays, and I can see that 2,300 is where the signal line is coming in here, right? That smart trail is coming in, excuse me, not the signal line. The smart trail is coming in to that level, but I do have a take profit right around 2,500, right? So I'm not getting right along that level that the Bollinger Band was telling me about, right? But I am starting to see that there are a few different level options of where Ethereum could drop down to before it starts to move higher. After all, now another indication that we may have topped out here from this test, and that we're likely to go lower before we go higher, is how universally this was rejected here. It's very, very flat, and we also saw rejection levels right around these levels before. at right around 4,000. Okay, so it's pretty uniform, right? It's a big psychological number for Ethereum as well. Has some history. The other thing too is you see it peaking out of this Bollinger Band, right? In a time where there's not really a lot of hype, a lot of news around Ethereum. There's some, definitely not none, but not an exceeding amount, such as you'd see around Sui, right, or Ondo, right around now. But the other reason why I think we're more likely to go down than try to test back at 4,000 over this next week or two is actually because of this reversal band here. There was enough daylight here, right, to go ahead and light up a football stadium. That's a lot of margin between the reversal band on the weekly clouds. You see here we got some wicks very clearly into that reversal cloud. And here we got multiple candlesticks get not just into that first cloud, but also into that second cloud as well, right? So we're not seeing that here. That's showing me that momentum has slowed, and while the reversal bands have actually widened, that's signaling more volatility, and less of that volatility is actually to the upside. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if we can validate that and find some confluence with that momentum read on the King of Momentum indicators, which is a Luxago oscillator matrix. This shows me here that in fact we are seeing a drop down in momentum. The hyperwave has peaked here. I'm still on the weekly chart, has peaked out here, and likely we're gonna see a continued move downward, right? Because we saw this confirmation of a reversal dot here from the hyperwave, and this is likely going to come back down. Where it finds support, we don't know exactly, but in my opinion, I do think we continue to see some downside for Ethereum. What would convince me that we're done selling off is when this momentum finds a support, and then like we saw back here, right? There was a mid sell off because this overall was a downtrend because we put in a low here and then another low here. But there was a mid downtrend reversal, right? That was confirmed by a reversal dot. So if I see that and then I get a dot here, that could potentially show me that the bulls might actually be coming back. Now, again, I talked about bullishness returning in January. That's just a few days away, right? But it may not all happen at once, right? There might be kind of a calling your bluff type of an effect until these Wall Street participants go ahead and jump back in and start to make their allocation for 2024. After all, the big question that everybody who's a sophisticated investor is asking is, could these assets go lower? I'd much rather buy it there, right? And until these assets test lower and they fulfill what these momentum indicators are showing that they should go lower, then there's not going to be as much enthusiasm around buying them as we've seen throughout the duration of 2020, throughout the duration of 2024, right? As we've seen, Ethereum has had a pretty good year, not a great year. It's only up 51% since the end of January of 2024, but it also has since that time has tested as high as almost having a 90% year, right? So pretty good for Ethereum. For Bitcoin, it's had a much better year. We won't measure that out for the sake of time. We'll keep moving. But now it's time to go ahead and jump into the story that is wreaking havoc across the headlines. Everybody's scrolling through and they're trying to get their head around what is going on with Tether. Well, I'm going to go ahead and give you all my take on this after spending probably about an hour this afternoon kind of reading up on it and figuring out what's going on. Here's my conclusion. This is what you really need to know, especially if you're in Europe. You guys can follow me here on Twitter. Would really appreciate it. If you are in Europe, it's very risky to hold USDT through December 29th of this year, right? Most likely outcome of the MiCA rules on stablecoins is that USDT will eventually become EU compliant. That's my belief, right? And I don't cite anything to support that necessarily, but that's just my belief, is that USDT has kind of entered into that world where it's a little bit too big to fail. I know that those might be strange words to use in the crypto industry, as it's seen as much more libertarian, much more laissez-faire. However, I do think that USDT is a very big player. They're invested as a company in a lot of different big projects, right? But there is kind of the feeling that if USDT were to completely go away and that this was the beginning of that, exodus of or kind of toppling of USDT, that there would be a lot of implications for that, and that is why people are kind of freaking out, so to speak, and why you might be seeing it in your timeline. But my base case for what ends up happening here is less that USDT loses, and it's much more that the MICO rules are either reinterpreted or USDT through Tether, becomes compliant with those MICO rules. That's what I think is going to happen. Is it going to happen in Q1 of 2025? I don't think so. I think there is going to be a period of time where, and this is why I put this first line, if you're in Europe, it's going to be very risky to hold USDT because I'm not convinced that it's quote unquote illegal, allegedly. I think what it is, it's just risky. And why would you take risk when you can have so many other stable coins or cryptos, or you could just hold fiat if you really want to be pegged outside of volatile assets? There's not going to be a huge, gigantic risk. So brings me to my last part. So I expect volatility through December 30th, transition period, tax loss harvesting as well, and in the medium term, this should cause overall selling pressure for crypto and Bitcoin. So I think it's going to, in general, cause selling pressure. I do think it will be generally bearish, right? However, I don't know that this is going to be overly bearish. I don't know that this is going to bring crypto to its knees. I don't feel that way at all. But I do think categorically that it's overall going to be, selling pressure as folks go ahead and sell out of an exchange where they're only using USDT, they sell crypto, they get into USDT, and then they transfer to a different stablecoin and use a different exchange, either through VPNs or they just exit crypto altogether in the EU. However, there's another game in town, and it's called Circle, and it's called a slew of other stable coins, such as the new one that Ripple just released, RLUSD, right? So I think it's just a matter of time, and people who are invested in crypto and they're aware and they know they need to get out of USDT, I think overall there will be some initial selling pressures, but overall this is not going to be super, super significant. So that's kind of my perspective on this. Is it going to cause a huge blow up? No. Is there potential for that? I'm not going to say completely zero potential for a big blow up because USDT is pretty big. It is pretty influential, right? However, I just don't see this blowing up and becoming such a big problem because the individual choice that is to be made uh, would be exit crypto altogether. And I don't think that the alternatives are any better. I think the euro and the dollar are not are not better than stablecoins, right? Just full stop. And so I do think people will be compelled to stay in stablecoins until these assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum that I covered pretty in depth here do find their bottoms. And then we'll see a huge exodus out of stablecoins, but not into bonds and European or US equities. They'll go into crypto, right? Because they've been seen as bottoming out and altcoin season beginning. All right. So I want to go ahead and pause here for a second and see what you all are saying in the chat here. Let's see. Dip Buyer 83 said, yeah, we'll dip down to 2,800 ETH and people will say the bull market is over and we buy it up. Absolutely. Eric Wallen said, if USDT depends down, I'm buying the crap out of it. Oh, depegs down. Yeah, I don't see USDT depegging as well. I just don't see that happening. I think people that are claiming that are trying to stir up sensation. Dylan Martinez says, I don't think ETH is scarce. It has infinite supply. Thank you, Dylan Martinez, for providing some clarity there. There is obviously some scarcity to it, but you're right. There is theoretically infinite supply through the proof of stake rather than proof of work mechanisms there. Much appreciated correction. And as I'm talking and speaking, and you do this too, I'm sure, at home. While you're talking and speaking, you hear things that you're saying, and you're like, well, that's slightly less true maybe than what I would have wanted to say. But it's mostly true, right? Ethereum is scarce today in that there aren't an infinite amount of Ethereum out there today, right? But there is the potential for more Ethereum to be minted, right? That is different from Bitcoin. Although I do believe Ethereum is net deflationary at this point because of some of the more recent updates. All right. JR Block said USDT is just FUD, in my opinion. I tend to agree. And Brillo pointing out there's USDT FUD once a year anyway. So absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into our final stories here. We're going to be getting into, it's more bullish stories for Bitcoin, right? But it's really interesting new avenues of potential ways to expose yourself to Bitcoin price through some interesting new ETFs. So let's get into it. One of them is from Bitwise, has filed for a Bitcoin Standard Corporation's ETF with the SEC. The fund aims to offer exposure to stocks of the companies that have adopted the Bitcoin standard with at least 1,000 Bitcoin in their corporate treasuries. This one's really, really interesting. Obviously, the first one that would come to mind would be MicroStrategies. But believe it or not, there are many, many more US corporations that have bought Bitcoin and hold them either in their treasury or just on their balance sheet, right? This is really interesting. This is something that actually, when I read it for the first time, I thought to myself, I actually wouldn't mind buying this. This is a really, really interesting financial product that gives me exposure to Bitcoin while also giving me a bit of a hedge in the corporate world of the U.S. equities, right? So you are kind of straddling two different worlds because, after all, MicroStrategy is an excellent example in that it has a revenue generating business that it that it operates too. It's not just a Bitcoin holding company, although it is kind of quickly becoming that as a majority of its business operations. It also runs a software consulting and development company, right? They do stuff. They have people that are fulfilling client contracts. And many of these other corporations that will presumably be in this ETF do the same thing. So you're getting Bitcoin ETF exposure. I'm sorry, you're getting Bitcoin price exposure with a bit of a hedge that, and potentially a bit of a managed fund boost as well, because you're also getting the fact that these U.S. corporations are going to be going to be much more sophisticated and be able to deliver sophisticated gains when it comes to Bitcoin holding. After all, they are among the first corporations in the U.S. to buy Bitcoin, right? So it must mean that they're pretty smart, right? Obviously, you have to take that with a grain of salt, but I do think the logic does hold up. Speaking of people that are smart, we'll go to this next story here. Vivek Ramaswamy, maybe you haven't heard his name in a while, but he's back. Vivek Ramaswamy, Strive Asset Management files for Bitcoin Bonds ETF. Kind of similar to this Bitwise Standard Corporations ETF, but this one's got a bit of a twist. Instead of buying stocks and holding them in an ETF, it looks like they're going to be holding corporate bonds, right? Convertible bonds. Let's get into the details here. This actively managed fund will provide exposure to Bitcoin through convertible securities with a primary focus on MicroStrategy's holdings. I like this word primary focus here because that tells me that, similar to how Bitwise is actually branching out to more than just MicroStrategies that have more than MicroStrategy, it's branching out to other corporations that have adopted the Bitcoin standard, right? In the same way, there will only be a primary focus on MicroStrategy. Now, initially, I would expect this Strive Bitcoin Bond ETF to mostly hold the convertible bonds of MicroStrategies, but this primary focus kind of hints that there could be more to come. Here's the investment strategy. At least 80% of the fund's assets will be allocated to Bitcoin bonds and related derivatives like swaps and options. Now, this is very attractive to somebody like me because I can't get my hands on this very easily. I would have to jump through a couple of different hoops in order to buy bonds, corporate bonds of MicroStrategy, right? Or much less getting to the options market or swaps. So, options is much more accessible to the average retail trader, but swaps, I don't think you can get access to. I think you have to be quite sophisticated and have some brokerage accounts that are not necessarily available to retail. So this overall is a value add, right? Because it's giving me exposure to assets that I could not get my hands on before. So Vivek, good guy, yet again, but it doesn't stop there. Performance will closely correlate with MicroStrategy's Bitcoin outcomes. So you might be sitting there wondering, what is a convertible bond? Let me explain it to you simply. right? All a bond is essentially it's a fundraising mechanism. It's an IOU, right? And sometimes it has a yield, sometimes it doesn't, right? But most of the time, it has a little bit of a yield that serves as an incentive for you to give me money and for me to do something with that money that's either revenue generating, like a corporation like Apple, or non-revenue revenue generating, like like the United States government. Okay, but because the United States government can print money, they can not only pay you back your principal, but they can pay you back that yield, that interest, right? Right now, around 4.5%. So what a corporate bond is, it's the same thing, right? You're just giving MicroStrategies, let's say $100, right? And I believe the yield on it is very, very low. I believe it's 0.05, right? So it's not a lot of yield, right? But it is something. It's not zero. Okay. And the important thing is it's convertible for a certain amount of stock in MicroStrategy in the future. If you wanted to, you could say, hey, I want to convert this bond into stock in the future, and that would be worth a lot more money, right? So it's kind of a way to have an options contract on MicroStrategy stock, but instead of buying their stock, you're buying bonds, giving MicroStrategy's liquidity, giving them dollars that they can go turn around and buy Bitcoin and add more Bitcoin to their treasury. In this way, you can benefit. Now, who really benefits? It's Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy over there. There's just a strong argument to be made that they're making quite a bit more of a gain than you would be as a bondholder. However, this type of a strategy is really, really interesting. It's really revolutionary. And it's one of the most popular strategies to get price exposure to Bitcoin in some of the higher level sophisticated worlds of hedge fund trading, right? So, very exciting stuff. What we can take away from these two big ETF announcements is that the momentum is far from over. Last year, we saw historic new Bitcoin related ETFs coming out January 10th from Fidelity and BlackRock and a few others, right? VanEck, 21 shares. This kind of rocked the world of Bitcoin, right? Those ETFs filled up with AUM, with assets under management, meaning people swap their Bitcoin, their dollars for these ETFs faster than gold, right? I believe, let me try to get this right. I believe it was, we just read the statistic, 40 billion, the ETFs got up to $40 billion in less than a year, which took the gold ETFs, 20 years to get to 40 billion AUM. Okay. So that's very, very significant. But what these new ETF offerings are showing is that the momentum is not stopping. Wall Street believes, and sophisticated Wall Street operators like Bitwise and Vivek Ramaswamy, right? They believe that there's actually more dollars out there that want exposure to Bitcoin, but that exposure vehicle is not perfectly suited for them quite yet. They believe that actually there would be a big pool of money that wants to go buy these convertible bonds from MicroStrategies, right? Or that want to go buy an ETF and gain exposure to a diversified basket of US equities, US companies, corporations that hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And then we also saw the SEC approval for an ETF of a that holds Bitcoin and Ethereum with a heavier Bitcoin weight. Okay. All of these are signaling to me that sophisticated Wall Street operators believe that there's more juice to squeeze in this lemon that is Bitcoin, right? And what does that ultimately mean? It means that they're all placing a bet by paying their legal staff money to write up all the specifications and terms of agreement for these ETFs. They're paying their operations staff and their quantitative staff to run all the weightings for these ETFs. Complicated, high paying jobs are being activated to create new investment vessels that ultimately just make the price of Bitcoin go up. And they would not be making these investments in Bitcoin ETFs of these exotic varieties that I've just described to you unless they thought that the price of Bitcoin would go up, because all of these ETFs are predicated on people buying more of them. And these Wall Street firms like BlackRock, Fidelity, Bitwise, generating fees from people ultimately buying these ETFs. Of course, they make a fee when they're sold as well, some of them, but they really, really want folks to buy them, right? Because the more buying there is, the more activity and promise for future selling and a fee that could potentially come then, right? The more you fill it up, the more it could potentially empty in the future. If it just fills up a little bit, you're only going to get a little bit of selling fees in the future, right? They really want this thing to swell high and for ultimately to remain pretty high, but then kind of find a channel to kind of sell, buy and sell in over a much longer period of time. Tshroom, what am I to make of all this? I don't really care. I just buy Bitcoin and I hold it in a cold storage wallet. That is really, really good for you. The reason why I'm excited by this is because it's a clear statement from Wall Street that the momentum is not over for Bitcoin and that there is a lot of demand out there that's locked up that really wants to buy Bitcoin in this very specific type of way that only these ETFs are going to provide. It's very bullish. It's showing that people are continuing to risk operations at their sophisticated Wall Street companies and also risk dollars to be able to go ahead and provide these new financial services to the market. It makes me bullish, and it makes Robert Kiyosaki bullish, as he says, buy one Satoshi and get rich. So I want to thank you all for watching today. We're going to get into the factoid of the day, but if you've enjoyed this coverage here of the crypto markets, go ahead and consider subscribing, smash the like button. I'm not worried by the USDT news. I think in the short term, there will be volatility, so hold on tight to something stable, right? I would not try to trade the volatility that we're going to be seeing over this weekend and next week. I would just go along business as usual with your DCA strategies, right? Again, not financial advice, but in terms of trading, we do have the what's going to happen with these expiries, the kind of the fallout of that, the aftermaths, as it were, and then we're going to have whatever is going to end up happening with Tether and this deadline. I think both of those are likely to be essentially nothing burgers, and Bitcoin, again, may not even break 93,000 and close a candle below that. I think there's a good chance of that. However, regardless of what happens, remember, nothing has changed with Bitcoin fundamentally. In fact, the only things that have changed is that throughout 2024, the most popular person in the world, Donald Trump, has become an advocate for it. And he said that the country that he just got elected to president is going to swallow up a lot of Bitcoin and create it and assimilate it into the foundation of the treasury for that country. That country is America. It's the biggest, most free country in the world. Maybe you could challenge me on that. Let me know in the comments. Can you name a freer country than America? But Smay, I think we've covered these markets pretty well. Let's go ahead and jump on into the factoid of the day. Let's challenge my intelligence, see if I can get it right.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into the factoid chamber. Joining us is, as always, is the elf. And as you can see, the elf did something. He kept the same image, but modified it slightly. So thank you for putting a little bit more effort into this week's question of our factoid of the day. Thank you, elf, for finally doing your job. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and read this. What is embedded in the Coinbase of, not Coinbase the exchange, by the way, you guys, the Coinbase as in blockchain technology. What is embedded in the Coinbase of Bitcoin's Genesis block? A hash of the first Bitcoin transaction. B, the headline of a UK newspaper. C, Satoshi Nakamoto's public key. Or D, the Merkle root of all subsequent blocks.
This is a good one, Smay. I don't know how many people would know this. I certainly don't. And that's why we have these little factoids, is because it challenges us and it exposes us to new and exciting information. I'm going to go with a hash of the first Bitcoin transaction. That's such an important thing. It would be held in something called a Coinbase. So let's go ahead and check it out.
All right. You're wrong.
Headline of a UK newspaper. Very interesting.
Yes, so it's very interesting. I didn't put any of the extra writing on it, but basically there was a newspaper talking about the negative state of financial stuff, and so I guess Satoshi, as a bit of a manifesto, coded that into the Genesis block for his project Bitcoin. So isn't that fascinating?
Yeah,
that's kind of like I wish I had the article ready to show you guys, but that is very fascinating because it's like, wow, he really meant what he was doing. Like it was he was fueled by wanting to make a world a better place financially. So
That's right.
isn't that isn't that something, Shroomy?
It is something, Smay, for sure. It is something, but what is it? What is that something? And I think it's bullish, right? I think that it just shows that the entities which created Bitcoin, were very sophisticated. And Bitcoin was created in 2009, right, at a time where it was kind of the worst part of the U.S. financial crisis, right, when the housing market crumbled. If you don't know this story, go and do yourself a favor and watch the movie The Big Short. That does a great job of explaining what happened, also from a somewhat unbiased perspective. But emerging from that ashes where a lot of people's life savings came crumbling down because they were overexposed to the housing market, um, rose from the ashes the phoenix that is Bitcoin. Of course, we're all so very, very excited about it, and rise it did. Initially trading for around, I believe, 10 cents a Bitcoin, now is trading for just under $100,000 a Bitcoin. So it's very, very exciting. And of course, along that same period, the dollar itself has become very devaluated, which is the denominator of a lot of assets around the world. So it's not just that Bitcoin is becoming more and more valuable. It's also that the dollar is becoming less valuable. And a lot of people view 2009 as actually kind of the starting gun, so to speak, or the checkered flag signaling the beginning of something new, a race to a financial future that was uncertain. And that Bitcoin does seem to be the greatest level of certainty in which providing a guiding light of what the future of finance actually is. Of course, Ethereum, Cardano, Solana, Chainlink, Ondo definitely provide some ideas of what the future could look like as well, with tokenization, faster blockchains, smart contracts. But Bitcoin really does seem to be adopted in a way that folks are very, very sure that Bitcoin is going to be a pillar of the future in which we use language to ascribe value to goods and services. Bros, this has been real fun. And Crux could not join me today because he had a migraine. So make sure to keep him in your prayers for a swift recovery from his migraine. He gets from time to time. And Tim should be back on Monday. But make sure you join us tomorrow, 11 a.m. Saturday show, where we'll be getting into the top news of the day, getting into the charts, seeing what is happening with this weekly candle MACD bearish cross that's coming up, seeing if there's been any developments with that. And Monday, Tim will be back. And right after this show, make sure you go check out Fundamental Friday in the Discord. You can find access to the Fundamental Friday show that will be coming on in our Discord by going to the link below. And right here is the general free Discord. You'll be able to get access and very quickly find how to watch the Fundamental Friday, where Crux goes much deeper into the altcoins of it all. Today we talked mostly about Bitcoin and Ethereum, right, which is the very surface of all that is crypto, all of the innovations that have come about from the innovation of blockchain technology. Altcoins are a whole nother world of speculation of what could be the next big pillar of the financial future that we're all going to be living in. Of course, there's some in the altcoin world that are much more certain than others, like Chainlink and Solana seem to have curried a lot of favor in our neck of the woods, but other influencers and investors in crypto seem to think that other altcoins are going to do well. We know who's doing well because the market determines that and resets the price of each asset every single day. We can see who's been making good calls, and Crux has been making really good calls with what are called mid to lower cap cryptos that have a much more explosive potential. While Bitcoin may only double or triple in 2025, it could do less than that, by the way. But while Bitcoin will do something around a double or tripling, right, there could be small caps and mid caps that not just could, but will do 30, 50x, right? And while we aren't going to put a big portion of our trading portfolio or our investing portfolio in small or mid caps, there is a pretty strong argument to be made that if you understand the fundamental technology, you're willing to put in the work and understand what you're investing in, some of those smaller or mid cap gains could really, really be worth it. So we'd love to explore those. And that's all on Fundamental Friday. It's coming up right after this stream. So let me get out of here and let you guys get into the Discord and watch Fundamental Friday. Adios.